Perfect. So, hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here today. My name is Macy Cheeks, and I am the co founder of Blacks in IO Psychology. And we are so excited to kick off the first webinar in our HBCU Task Force series. So, this is an introduction to IO Psychology. And so, while we're waiting for folks to trickle in a bit, we have a couple questions for you all. If you could sound off in the chat, we'd love to know more about you all. So, what's your name? What's your current major and year? What school do you attend? And before today, what have you heard, if anything, about IO psychology? Feel free to answer one of those questions, all of those questions, but we would love to hear from you all. And we'll just give you a couple minutes to pop that in the chat and we'll continue on. Alrighty, so we will go ahead and continue on, but please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat when you have a moment. We'd love to hear from you all. So I'd love to start off just by sharing a bit more about us. So the HBCU Task Force is a group of IO professionals that are dedicated to ensuring that HBCU students have access to the field of industrial organizational psychology. And our goal is really to connect students to academic and career pathways, to increase diversity within the field, and to ultimately support the development of an IO psychology program on HBCU campuses. And so this initiative grew out of the nonprofit that I co-founded back in 2019. So that's Blacks in IO Psychology. My co-founder and I, we both actually attended Howard University for undergrad. And when we entered our graduate program for IO, we realized that we were a bit behind the curve as compared to some of our peers. They had some information and insight about IO psychology before us in their undergrad. And so we thought it would be nice to have an organization that's geared towards prepping undergrad students for the field of IO. And so we host conferences annually. We have a mentorship program. So definitely check us out. I'll pop some more information in the chat later about Blacks in IO. But all of that to say, we are super excited to be here really for this foundational session with you all today. And so by the end of today's webinar, we hope that you all will walk away with an understanding of what IO psychology is. You'll learn more about the real world career paths in the field, and definitely walk away with some next steps, things that you can do today if you're interested in pursuing IO. And so then before we get started quickly, a couple of housekeeping notes. Please make sure your microphones are muted. Feel free to use the chat for questions. So I'll be monitoring the chat throughout. Pop your questions in there. We'll make sure we get those answered for you all. Again, this session is being recorded and will be shared out with everyone afterwards. And we are expecting to be together today for about an hour. So we're hoping to wrap up around 7 p.m. Eastern time. And so with that, I'd love to introduce our amazing speakers for today. So first up, we have Elizabeth Jenkins. She is a senior talent and organizational development consultant with Plant Moran. She brings over 9 years of experience across IO consulting and research, and she holds both a master's and a PhD in IO psychology, and is also a proud alum of Howard University. So thank you so much for being here today, Elizabeth. And we're also joined by Alexandra Bishop, who will be sharing more about her day-to-day and what her life looks like as an IO psychologist. She is a senior talent management and organizational development specialist at Lenovo, and she leads work in employee listening and talent management, and she holds a master's in IO psychology from Baruch College. And so, with that, I will go ahead and pass it over to Elizabeth to get us started today.
Thank you, Macy. So, as Macy mentioned, I'm Elizabeth, and I am so excited to be here with you all. I am a BIOP member, and as Macy mentioned, a HBCU alum. So, I'm just really happy to be able to share more about IO with other HBCU students. In terms of what I do at Plant Moran, just as a quick background, I provide services internally and externally to clients that include succession planning, leadership development, selection and assessment services, organizational network analyses. So, as a consultant, the work is pretty varied, but I will also leave the details about day to day to Alexandra for later on. In terms of what we have going on tonight, you can see it's going to be pretty structured. So we've already done the welcome and introductions. Next, we'll talk about what IO psychology is pretty broadly, and then we'll also talk about some examples of that at work in the field. We'll also briefly touch on some steps to an IO career and what that looks like, and even some immediate actions that you can take after this webinar. Then we'll hear from Alexandra about her role, and then we'll close with a open discussion and dialogue and hopefully some really great Q&A. So we can go to the next slide. And essentially, we'll start with what is IO psychology, right? So it is the study of human behavior within the workplace. And so with the research, it is to understand and improve organizations, full stop. And that typically looks like how organizations can hire the right candidate that fit within the organization, and then also train people that they already have so that they are able to fulfill their roles and responsibilities in the best way. Also, the goal in terms of IO research and how that data is used is to help create really healthy, sustainable, and equitable workplaces. So ensuring that people want to stay in that organization. Related to that, research in IO is typically used to enhance employee performance and well-being. So again, just making sure that people are operating at their full capacity and that they are not burning out and they are equipped with everything that they need to have the career that they want. And then lastly, also IO research can be used to impact culture, whether that's through teams or leadership. So supporting leaders in terms of their own development, or also supporting leaders and making change within their organization or on their teams to make sure that everyone's getting along, everyone is working effectively, and again, that everyone is having a great experience. And so we can move to the next slide. So, industrial organizational psychology, IO psychology, sometimes within the field, people quibble about like what side you're on. But at the end of the day, we're all IO psychologists. But so with the I side, that's the industrial part. And that typically focuses a bit more on that selection aspect. So who are the right candidates and what is the right role for them, right? What is this job? What are the requirements and who needs to fill it? That's essentially the questions that are asked to people more on that I side. On the O side, we have people who are typically a bit more focused on making sure that the employees that are already in the organization feel safe, feel heard, and feel as if they have the resources that they need in order to advance their career. So that's typically where you might hear terms like employee engagement surveys, even DEI, working on the team dynamics, and so forth. And so the beauty in IO psychology is that you can do so much with it. You can have many careers even with an IO psychology degree, and that there are different sectors that you can apply your skill set. So you can work within corporate and business and be a consultant. You can also work internally and provide those engagement surveys to companies and those employees within. You can take those skills and work at a tech startup in terms of, again, keeping with those same skills or also applying your knowledge in terms of new HR products, for example. Same understanding healthcare and understanding what hospitals need so that doctors and nurses are not facing burnout. Also, with the government and military, a lot of that work can sometimes be selection and assessment. So making sure that we're selecting the right people who are qualified to serve in the Army, for example, and also making sure that the right people are in the government positions or that the people that are already there have what they need in order to be the best leader. Within higher education, it can, instead of the typical corporate employees, the focus can be on faculty. So, what are faculty needing in order to better serve students? What is the higher education? What is that culture like at the college and university? And then also, how is that impacting the students? And then, last but not least, there's also a space to serve nonprofits. So, taking any of all that I've said and applying that to the nonprofit world, but also focusing on volunteer engagement. And so, again, instead of looking at employees, you can focus on volunteers. Go to the next slide. Yeah, so essentially, IO psychology, you can move to the next slide, but IO psychology, its goal is to solve uh, organizational problems that ideally save a lot of money, and that's what we do. So here are some examples of IO psychology in the real world. I'm going to pause so that you have some time to read the screen. And so as we can see here from this slide is that IOs have been able to have a real impact in multiple different sectors in multiple different ways, and that there are a number of different organizations that IOs can work with and how they can use their skill set to make an impact. So um, there are also ways in terms of this is a more applied side of IO, but of course, a lot of these applied IOs are also using research from IO professors and researchers that are still actively engaged in academia. So, using that research and then translating that into the business world, and then making sure that these employees at these various organizations have what they need. And so another great thing about IO psychology is that it is not only impactful, but it comes with a good amount of money. So um, for the median salary is about 147,000 for an employee, and that number can definitely continue to grow within someone's career as they gain more education, more work experience. Also can depend on the sector that they're in. So tech, healthcare, for example, that can have an impact on salary. And it's a benefit to be able to be paid well for the work that you do while still being able to have a positive impact on others. And lastly, the field is still growing. So there is many opportunities to grow your career within IO. And then also, as many of you are undergraduate students, there's more than enough room for you all as well. It's not an oversaturated field or anything like that. So the more the merrier. And so the field of IO psychology is missing something, and that something is you. And so unfortunately, the one kind of IO psychology and why groups like BIOP are so important is that there is a diversity issue. And so less than 5% of IO psychologists are Black. And so that means that our experiences, our ability to impact research, and our ability to impact systems and policies, that's also missing. And so that insight is very much needed in order to guide um, and support people who look like us, but also support everyone. And so when that information is missing, everyone suffers regardless of race, but especially those who are not in that room to be able to make a decision. And so as an HBCU alum, um, because you all will be graduating, you all bring a great skill set. I know that my experience at Howard allowed me to really gain a strong focus on community and understanding the importance and value of people, which is going to be a really important value to have as an IO psychologist. It also taught me resilience and grit, and so being able to push through my PhD program and also be able to push through any setbacks that I may have experienced or issues that occurred during that PhD program. And then also with a strong focus on leadership at HBCUs. Typically, a lot of HBCU graduates are already leaving the university with the skill sets needed in order to navigate any of those sectors that I previously mentioned. So whether you want to go into corporate or tech or healthcare or nonprofit, most likely you already have those skills and leadership abilities to be able to influence a room. And we can go on to the next slide. Okay, so here I'm going to talk a bit more about the path to IO psychology. So as an undergrad, it's really great if you have a background in psychology, but that's not necessary. It doesn't need to be specifically psychology or IO psychology, but having the research experience is actually what's going to be really important for people who are pursuing a grad program. And there is a need to get a graduate degree as an IO psychologist. That is something that, if interested in an IO role and something that a role that is specifically seeking an IO psychologist, then they're going to be looking for someone who has either a master's or PhD. So the major is not super important, but within that undergraduate experience, getting research is going to be very important. So that can look like joining a research lab, conducting an honors thesis, and doing independent research, or also figuring out maybe some ways to do a post-bac and get additional research experience in between undergrad and grad school. Another note, one thing I want to know about the graduate school program is that if you do decide that you're interested in getting a PhD, welcome. I support you on that journey. But also, there's no need to pay for a PhD. So that's one thing you want to keep in mind as you hopefully begin researching and getting an understanding of graduate education, is that PhD programs should be free to you. And so some next steps that you can take immediately after this webinar is that you can check out the Blacks in IO website. You can also go to SIOP, which is the Society of Industrial Organizational Psychology, and check that out. You can begin to research graduate programs and get an understanding of what they're looking for and how your experience aligns. You can also begin to check out IO research, so getting access to academic articles and seeing what different topics might interest you, especially if you're interested in that PhD path. And then you can begin also reaching out and conducting coffee chats with IO professionals so that you can have a better understanding of what the IO field is like and maybe also begin to identify what you would want to focus on as an IO. Because as I mentioned, there's so much to do, there's so much diversity. And so, being able to really narrow down on what interests you and your focus, especially early on, will be an asset. And so, related to building your network and getting those coffee chats, you can definitely join professional organizations. So, joining BIOP, joining PSYOP, also attending conferences. So, BIOP has a conference that will be happening later this summer. That will be a great time to learn more about what Black IO psychologists are doing. There's also PSYOP, so that conference is later this month. But if you're very motivated, you can head out to New Orleans. I will be there, so feel free to say hi to me. But there's always PSYOP is an annual conference, so you can always try to attend at a later time. And then there's always LinkedIn. So get on LinkedIn, reach out or follow individuals that have a large presence within the IO field, and just to get a sense of what are some of the important topics among IOs. Okay, so next we will hear from Alexandra and her day to day.
Great, thank you so much. Hi everyone, I'm Alexandra. I'm just going to give an overview about my background, how I got into IO psychology, and what it's like to basically have a day in the life of an IO psychologist in the workplace and in corporate specifically. I'm going to start with kind of going through my background and how I found IO because it may relate to some of you on the call. So, I got my bachelor's in psychology. I was originally going to pursue a clinical path, that was my original interest. I also double majored in English, mostly for fun, but had a few kind of career interest changes throughout my bachelor's degree. Once I graduated, I was getting that research experience, but it was more clinical oriented. I will say it didn't matter too much because research is research. So you learn a lot of those skills regardless of what topic you're researching. So if you're doing research right now and perhaps it's clinical or something else and you want to pivot to IO, don't worry, any of that experience is super valuable. So I ended up doing research and then I started working for a mental health clinical center. And I got kind of some experience in more of that business and HR part of the company and really just loved seeing what it was like to make an organization more effective, how to treat your employees and keep top talent, and started to realize I enjoyed some of the business work than I did the clinical work. And that's where I discovered IO psychology. So I was a little delayed. I didn't really know much about it until after I had my bachelor's degree. Learned through a few colleagues that were getting their PhD in IO, learned all about it, fell in love with the idea. And fast forward, I ended up pursuing a Master of Science in Industrial Organizational Psychology from Baruch College in New York City. One thing that was great about this program, which feel free to look into this if you want to pursue the master's route, is all of my classes were in the evenings. So all of my classes were at 6 to 9 at night. I would take 2 to 3 classes a semester, and that way I could still work full time. I personally loved the work I was doing. I wanted to get more experience, and I really wanted to bring what I was doing in school and learning in school to the workplace. It felt like the perfect IO route. So I did that. It took me 2.5 years to get my master's. I won't say it was easy. Definitely had to really learn how to prioritize my time, how to balance work, school, and life. Having a support system was really helpful. So if that's something you're interested in, it's definitely doable, but it can be a lot of work to balance jobs and grad school. But there are a lot of opportunities for part-time roles or internships too, where you don't have to necessarily work full time. So, throughout my time while I was in grad school, I held a variety of HR roles. So, a lot of the times I was working in small companies. So, as Elizabeth said, you can work across many industries, many sizes. I actually worked for a financial tech startup that was only 100 employees after I worked for the clinical center. And then I worked for a mid-sized public accounting firm, which was 5,000 employees. And now I'm at Lenovo, which is a huge global technology company. If you're familiar with the Lenovo laptop, that's probably what we're most known for. We're about 60,000 employees globally. So I've had experience in different sizes of orgs and gotten to see what it's like to work across different areas of human resources, which is where a lot of people that go applied IO kind of end up in a human resources type role. So, what I do at Lenovo, I am in the talent management and organization development team. That is very broad. They're both pretty broad topics, and we are a small but mighty team. So, we hold a lot of global projects across Lenovo. And just to give you a sense of my day in the life, I'm just going to focus on a few of those projects. You can kind of get a sense of what it's like to apply IO principles into an actual job. So one of the things I do in my role is called employee listening. Many of you maybe have never heard that term. It's a bit more of kind of an IO pop term, I would say. But it really is like it sounds. Employee listening is listening to your employees, and the intent is to really target things that you can learn from your employees about how they're feeling at work. So, are they satisfied in their job? What's their experience like with their manager? Do they feel they're being assessed and performance reviewed fairly? Do they feel included and a sense of belonging in the workplace? Are they satisfied with the benefits of the company? There are a lot of things you can learn from employees, and it's really one of the main ways to actually understand how employees are doing in the workplace and then being able to action on it. So one thing I do at Lenovo is we lead our global engagement survey, it's called. So it is how it sounds, it's a survey. It's a very large survey that measures a lot of those concepts I was just touching on and even more. Inclusion, total rewards, engagement, performance management, all of those things we measure directly from employees. And a lot of the times, this is an anonymous survey, ours is, and that way you can get really honest feedback from employees. From there, we collect all of this data. So some of it is quantitative, where employees are rating their satisfaction on a 1 to 5 scale, and some of it is qualitative, where we're actually getting comments from employees. So we do give employees opportunities to literally type out how they're feeling at work. From there, what my team does, we look at all that data. So we see it in different dashboards and heat maps and charts. We see it based on demographic data. We see it based on different leaders, what role you're in. So there are a lot of different ways we kind of cut and slice all of that information. And then that helps us inform leaders and managers on what they can do about it, which we call action planning. So you basically plan actions that you will take off of this data. Some of it you might not need any actions on. Maybe employees are satisfied in certain areas and there's not much that needs to be changed. But a lot of times there are key areas you can find that you can improve for an employee so that you can keep your top talent in the workplace. And as I said, it could be something like an inclusion program or a new learning and development training that's needed for a department, or maybe total rewards could be improved in the benefits package. And you really want to increase retention of your employees. You want to increase satisfaction in the workplace. And overall, you want employees to basically be the most effective and happy they can be while the organization is still succeeding. So I just wanted to give kind of an example of what it's like to actually have an IO Psych and HR related project in the day-to-day. Obviously, in the depths, I'm doing a lot of project management, a lot of reviewing data and finding insights. I'm developing the survey and doing survey design and using best practices and science to develop those items and questions. So I bring in a lot of what I learned from school into that project. I work on a few other projects at Lenovo, but don't have enough time to give you all of that information. So I hope it was helpful just to see what it's like from someone to go from a bachelor's in psych to discovering IO, choosing to go into it and working while going and getting your master's. And then now I work for a global org where I get to apply that. So definitely encourage everything Elizabeth already said. Network, follow people on LinkedIn, learn more. And if you're interested, just reach out to other people for coffee chats. And we all do a lot of different things. So you have so much to learn. Thanks, everyone.
I can jump back in here. So we're gonna start with a reflection prompt. But before we do that, thank you, Alexandra, for sharing your experience overall and then also what you do at Lenovo. So it sounds very interesting. I love surveys and employee listening. So I think that's cool. I like that you do it on a global scale as well. Um, and yeah, so before we end today, we do want to have you all think and reflect on your work experiences. So whether you were an employee, an intern, or even just your experience within a student organization, what is one way that an IO psychologist could have maybe improved that experience for you? So feel free to drop some of those thoughts into the chat. And then if you don't have, any thoughts right there, also begin to think about some questions that you would like to have answered before we end tonight. And as everyone's maybe thinking on the response to the prompt, I can give an example from my own experience. So I previously have worked as an independent consultant, and with that, I was a part of a collective. So we were all independent consultants, technically contractors. And so with that, there was really no expectations or accountability in terms of how we interact with one another. However, that was causing some issues when we were on a project together. And it wasn't just uh, us working independently. And so I was still in grad school at this time, but I felt it was necessary to clearly define roles and structures and expectations about who is leading the collective, who is going to be responsible for responding to prospective clients, for example, and then also how we will work together if we do have a shared client. And so that is one way that IOs can help to make an organization better, just creating really clear roles and responsibilities. Does anyone else have some examples that they could share? Maybe drop in the chat. All right. So we have worked as an intern in EAP office, and IO psychology would have helped the employees, yes, help them feel heard and understand how to improve their job satisfaction. So yes, that gets at what Alexandra was saying with like the employee listening. So being able to survey your employees, which can sometimes be a survey. Some people also do qualitative interviews, and but listen to them regardless of the method and understand what they need. Are they satisfied? And if not, why? So thank you for sharing that. Are there any other examples? Okay, so we're moving on to the Q&A. Thank you for that. So one question in the chat is it true that you can only call yourself an IO psychologist in certain states? Does that mean you have to have a license? So that's a great question. Technically, the answer is yes. So a psychologist is typically someone who is a licensed psychologist. So that's going to be someone who has that clinical background because they are trained to be licensed, and that's ultimately the goal of their program. However, typically in settings like this, you'll hear people say that they're IO psychologists just because IO psychology practitioner and researcher, that sometimes can get a little long. But the main point or takeaway is that they have a background in IO. But yes, typically a psychologist is someone who is licensed. Do we have any other questions?
I see in the chat, Akila had mentioned that IO psychology is often mistaken for human resources. Is there anything you all might want to say on that piece?
Yeah. Alexandra, did you want to speak on that?
Yeah, sure. So they are definitely different things, but they're intertwined, which is very interesting. So you can study human resources, and you can also separately study IO psychology, and you may learn similar things throughout your journey. I would say it's kind of the approach that's different. So IO psychology really tries to bring in that science, that research. So it's that blend between practice, so like a corporate job and academics and research. And we're trying to bring in best practices and science into how we approach things, even if it is in human resources, how we approach those. Human resources is more of like your traditional HR education route. It might not be as sciencey or bringing those things in. And that's where IO psychologists can add a lot of benefit. We use data more. We come with more best practices. We try and stay really informed in the industry. And oftentimes you'll see IOs in kind of like what I am in very niche parts of HR. So my HR department at Lenovo has all these different departments, and under our giant HR department is this tiny team of 8 people. That's my team. That's talent management and organization development. And half of the 8 people are IO psychologists or people with an IO psych background. And so you'll mostly find us in kind of those little areas. You can work in general HR as well, and you can study those separately. So they're not the same thing, but don't be surprised if there's an HR role that asks for an IO background. They do blend.
I also want to add that IOs can work in parallel with HR. So, for example, in my current role, we help with the selection assessment. So, typically, we'll review a candidate's assessment results and then provide our recommendation on whether or not that candidate should move forward. And then we send that to HR. So that's an example of us working together. Also, I mentioned we do some career development work. And so after someone is hired and they're going through that onboarding phase, which is going to be led by HR, we also work to support them and identify any growth opportunities as well as strengths that they can leverage in their new role at the firm. And so that's a way that IOs and HR can work together. So I see we have some additional questions in the chat. So, what internships are best for psychology majors getting IO related experience, but not falling into a clinical route? So, that's a good question. I would say at the undergraduate level, the focus should be on research versus internships. And so getting that research experience, and it doesn't matter if it's clinical or IO, but just getting that research experience so that you're prepared for graduate school. In terms of if you're still interested in internships, I definitely understand the need to work and also to get work experience while in undergrad or even grad school. I would say to look for programs that focus on hiring individuals with a psychology background, also ones that are interested in using surveys within the work, so doing survey development, maybe it be research like, but within a corporate setting. So conducting surveys, maybe conducting trainings, conducting work that IO would do after graduate school, for example. Then we have a question that says, can you branch into psychometrics after completing your IOP honors masters? So you can focus on psychometrics within IO. That is another aspect or another niche area within IO psychology. IO psychology is actually a STEM field. And one of the reasons it is a STEM field is because we are very much focused on psychometrics and making sure that our surveys are sound, valid, reliable, and legally defensible. And so psychometrics can be something that is focused on through your career. So there are IOs, whether within academia or also as practitioners who solely focus on that psychometrics. So I have an example from the reflection prompt, and it was shared that on OJob, they had only did the schedule on paper, and so and they wouldn't put it out a day or two before that work week. So it sounds like it was creating some stress, confusion. People were probably unsatisfied about not knowing when they're going to work. And so, yes, IO psychology could have definitely helped by bringing some structure, allowing management to know, like, hey, this process actually isn't the best practice for our employees. So the next question that we have is, how do IO psychologists coexist and grow with AI? What specific field would be best to pursue that pathway? And I'm going to pause. Alexandra, did you want to speak on this question? It's okay. I know I've been answering all of them.
No, no worries. I have some input. So from my experience just in, I would say the practitioner world or the corporate world, AI is everywhere. And they are, I would say everyone within kind of HR and IO-esque roles are trying to figure out how AI can improve what we're already doing. So actually an example in my work is we built an internal AI model at Lenovo that was able to analyze 40,000 plus comments from our engagement survey and then provide us the key themes and insights from it. So that's just a specific example. Or I know some are using AI to help with managers giving feedback to their employees. So being able to have managers feel more comfortable giving feedback because an AI tool can kind of coach you through it. I mean, there's AI in so many aspects, so I can't list them all. But I would say, I know you asked what specific field would be the best to pursue that. From my experience, AI is being embedded, or people are trying to embed it in everything. So I'm sure there are some roles that maybe are more targeted towards kind of like tech systems AI, but I don't think there's any shortage of AI being embedded into practices in jobs. So from especially where you all are in your career, by the time you have roles or whatever you go into, AI will likely be a part of your role. Elizabeth, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would maybe add that a way to think about it is, are you more interested in tech that helps people, or are you more interested in making sure people have the tech that they need to do their job? Because if you're more interested in that tech aspect, like completely interested in just AI in general, then IO may not be the best fit. But if you are interested more in that people side and are interested in how technology can be used to help people, then you can still definitely find opportunities to integrate AI into your IO preferences. And there are people, as Alexandra was saying, that there are people within the industry that are focused on AI, but also add that that is a research topic area. So if you like research and that interests you, that is also available within IO.
I can also answer the next one, the difference between a Master of Arts in IO Psych compared to a Master of Science in IO Psych. That's a great question. I have a Master of Science. I will say I would focus more on what the program provides and what's the best fit for you. The MS versus MA isn't as big of a difference or a big deal versus like what coursework do you want? What hours are the classes? Where is it located? But the main difference is usually Master of Science has more science incorporated in it. So, for example, my degree included a thesis. So I did have to complete a year-long thesis and research project and pass that thesis to get my master's. But other programs in New York that were MAs were more so maybe like an applied project. They worked with a company, as a consultant on a project with a team, or maybe they completed a big comprehensive exam to pass their master's instead of a research project. That was the main difference I saw. Also, we were required to complete a course in statistics and a course in research. I was used to that for my undergrad, so that wasn't too surprising. I'm sure Master of Arts and IO also have stats and data co courses as well, but it was a requirement to graduate. So I would say I like that I have an MS in IO since I didn't get a PhD. I feel like I at least got kind of a more of a heavy research-based master's, and I was being taught by PhDs in IO, but still was able to get a master's and not have to focus on the full PhD path. And then your follow-up careers that are data-driven in IO Psych, besides a research route, a more of a corporate applied role in data. I would say people analytics is a big term you could look into, like a just to look into what they do. People analytics is probably like the hot, I don't know, Elizabeth, like the hot topic term that blends people, HR, and analytics, and often having an IO background and data background for people analytics is great. They also tend to be higher paying because you come with a lot of data skills. For example, like a super data heavy people analytics role, even if it was for survey development, I don't even have all the skills for it because I don't know SQL or Python. So if you're interested in data but also interested in IO, look a little into that, see what some of the skills and background they ask for, and see if it's something you're interested in. Or if you're interested in research, that would be a different route.
Yeah, I would also add, just going back to that AI question, that looking into people analytics, that might interest you as well. Because a
Yep.
lot of the professionals who are interested in AI and IO, they tend to fall under that people analytics umbrella. And then I see Macy also added in the chat that um, some HR internships are also good experience. So yes, HR rotational program, also internship programs that are maybe even geared toward businesses, especially if you're interested in going into corporate, that can be very helpful. So we have our next question is it difficult finding an internship after completing your master's before writing the board exams? So what are you referring to when you say board exams?
And so I can jump in here because we do have some folks who are probably joining from South Africa. And so what I have learned is that for our folks who are pursuing IO in South Africa, there are board exams that they have to take in order to break into the field. And so, yes, I will touch base with some of our friends over at SIOP South Africa to see if we can get this question answered for you.
Well, welcome. I love that we're global. That's awesome. And sorry that we're unable to answer your question. That's just typically not our process here in the US, as Macy said. But yes, welcome. I love that you're here. Do we want to speak about maybe finding an internship during grad school at all? Would that be helpful? Maybe.
Yeah. I feel like you have more of a research background. Do you want to talk a bit about kind of how you approach getting research experience? And I can touch a little on like getting work during master's type school.
I can do that. So one thing that has been absent from this webinar is that research experience. So I did want to touch on that and say, IO psychology as a research career is definitely very valuable. It could be within academia. A lot of people who are more interested in research also tend to go into the government and that military sector as well. So, and those are the people also that are maybe um, within that people analytics group. So people who are very much interested in survey design and psychometrics. But moving on to research experience, I would say within the program that's pretty built in. So with my program, I went to Texas A&M for graduate school, and that's where I got my master's and my PhD. And so with that, we are required to complete a thesis in order to get our master's as well as our dissertation. So those are two major research projects that we get that we have to complete. Along the way within my program, we also tended to take on additional research projects. And so um, that experience can really vary in terms of how people go about that process. But I am someone who is very survey heavy. So I did a lot of work using like Qualtrics or some softwares that you might hear, Prolific, MTurk. I don't know if people are still using MTurk. I hope not. But using those types of softwares and platforms in order to recruit participants at the undergraduate level, and even just giving a bit of how I found out about IO psychology. I was maybe in my junior year when I realized like I don't want to go into clinical psych or any other psych career that most people were going into as a psychology major. And so I just went to the internet and I looked up what to do with this psychology degree and I found IO psychology and I said, okay, I'm interested in this. And so um, I took that information and my interest to a professor and I shared with him that I wanted to learn more about IO and he introduced me to a professor at George Mason, and I was able to join their colloquium and get more information about IO and information about the type of research that they work on and what's needed in order to get a PhD. In terms of the research experience on campus, I was an honor student, so it was required to complete an honors thesis. So thankfully, all I had to do was reach out to a professor and say, like, hey, I need this to graduate. Is there room available in your lab? And then that worked out. I think the same method could probably apply whether or not you're required to get a thesis and just say, like, hey, I'm really interested in gaining more research experience. And is there, any availability in your lab? Are you interested in having a research assistant if maybe they don't have a lab? And so just reaching out and seeing if there are any opportunities. And I did that. I pursued, worked on my honors thesis for about a year. And so I had about a year and maybe a little bit more because I had taken on a few other research projects throughout undergrad. But and I was able to leave with about a year and a half of research experience. And also that was not IO related. So my professor at the time was a social psychologist and his research focused on like metacognition. So what people think about themselves, and how that impacts performance essentially. So that's my experience with research. And then also, I will add that because I decided that I wanted to pursue IO psychology pretty late, I decided to take a gap year. So I took a gap year and worked as a human capital consultant in the DC area. And that was also a really great opportunity to learn more about what IOs can do in the day-to-day. We had some people who were focused on doing Army research within that firm. There are also people who were focused on doing online training, so developing the content behind trainings. And then we also did a mix of engagement surveys and workshop facilitation. And so I know that was a lot, but then I'll pass it to you, Alexandra.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'll re-emphasize for those of you that are in undergrad and maybe want to get more research experience or haven't even started. Um, like Elizabeth said, there are opportunities. Some schools, for example, will have like a summer research program you may be able to do. My undergrad had that where if you and a professor work together in a research project, you could stay there in the summer. There are honors thesis opportunities. I also did an honors thesis in undergrad. I would say that was instrumental to my just personal understanding of research. I also had a lot of fun. I just thought it was cool to run your own project. So it is a lot of work, and every school operates honors thesis a little differently. But if you aren't a senior yet and that's something you're interested in, I think that was the best research experience I gained. And then one ad for research experience, after I graduated undergrad, I actually started just reaching out to schools in my area or remotely. And I ended up doing, it was unpaid. I was working another paid jobs. This was very part-time. But I reached out, I think, to Drexel, which was remote, and then I was living in Louisiana for a little bit, so at LSU. And I just did maybe 5 to 7 hours for them a week. Again, it was unpaid, but it wasn't too grueling of work. And they were both just for PhD students that I was helping their research projects. And so, I mean, they loved having, a post grad reach out and ask to help. So I got two more kind of things of research experience on my resume that weren't full time, just by reaching out and basically offering my, services because I wanted experience. And then to the more applied side, I think we touched on that a good amount, just looking up different kind of keywords for internships. I know internships can be harder to come across, especially like summer internships are very competitive and kind of there aren't as many available as a full-time job. I wouldn't stress too much about it in undergrad, honestly. If you can get some research experience, if you can even shadow someone or an externship for a few days, just kind of filling your time with experiences that build your skills. And then after graduating, trying to see if that's where you want to get like a full-time internship or an entry-level job or a research role, or just go straight to grad school. I think that's where that becomes more important. But in undergrad, I really mostly, I mean, I worked at like CVS as a pharmacy technician in a coffee shop and did research. So I feel like I've been very successful in my career, and I did not do a corporate internship in undergrad, just for an example. So I think really just also have fun, like enjoy, have fun, really balance learning and being excited about it and getting experience while also just enjoying being a student and being young and yeah.
Alexandra, there's a follow-up question for you in terms of what kind of services you offered the
Oh,
PhD.
yes. So I basically reached out to, when I was in Louisiana, I reached out mainly to LSU. I think there may have been another school. And I just, for actual logistics, I like went online, looked at LSU psych departments, found different psych departments, found the like managers of the department or PhD students. Most of their emails were listed, or maybe their lab was listed with an email. And I just had a nice template that just introduced myself, said I was a recent graduate. I'm living in the area for a few months. Would love the opportunity to help with any research projects you have if you would welcome that for someone that's not a student at the school. And there was a lab at LSU. I think it was like a cognitive psych lab. And one of the students said that would be great. I'm running cognitive assessments on older adults. I need people to run the assessments. Come in, I'll, train you and you can do those. And then for Drexel, I had moved back to Pennsylvania for a bit. COVID had hit, which is why it ended up being remote. But I just reached out to a lot of Philadelphia area schools with the same thing. So I found grad school psych programs, their labs, emailed, offered my services. Some people emailed back and just said, we don't offer research opportunities for non-students, but thanks so much. And Drexel reached out and said, yeah, we definitely have opportunities if you have time. It's unpaid, but we are happy to offer that experience. So yeah, so just something, I don't even remember how I thought of the idea, but ended up just thinking, why not? I have some hours free during the week if someone could give me some experience to put on my resume and some skills.
Yes, I love that. I'll also add that when working on my master's and PhD, I would recruit undergraduate students. So I would typically send out flyers and requests via the listserv, the university listserv, and also post information to like our board within our department. So those are ways that you can maybe potentially seek out opportunities. And then in terms of tasks that those undergraduate students helped with, that ranged from administering the survey, so just hitting publish, doing some light editing on surveys to make sure there weren't any grammatical or spelling mistakes. Also piloting the survey, seeing how their experience was, how long it took for them to complete the survey, and then also any like basic data analyses. So cleaning the data, running um, like means and frequencies and anything like that. And then I will say, ideally, research is a two-way street, so you should be getting something from it. So building a relationship where you can eventually get a letter of recommendation, as well as getting some foundational skills that you can take with you to grad school. And so I know we're almost at time, and there is one more slide. So Macy.
Yes, so I will jump in here, but before I do that, thank you both so much for answering those questions and just being super thoughtful. This was great. I'm assuming that our students on the line learned a lot, got a lot of their questions answered, and so just thank you again for just going so deep into the answers for those questions. We appreciate it. And so we're going to go ahead and wrap up. And before we do that, I just want to walk through a few pieces of what's next in this series. So you'll see on the slide down at the bottom, there is a note about an IO toolkit. I want to touch on that first before you all drop. We have designed a very detailed roadmap to help guide you all on your curiosity and your interest in IO psychology. I will send out a link to that toolkit for you all to your email address today. And in that toolkit, it covers a lot of different topics, but some of the ones that kind of speak to what we discussed today. So it covers different experiences you should pursue if you're interested in IO, courses that you can consider during undergrad that could help bolster your application for grad school. We actually have some sample emails in that toolkit that you can use to send to faculty, similar to what Alexandra described that she was doing. We have a general timeline for graduate school application process and some graduate funding opportunities and tips. So definitely use that as a resource. Feel free to go through the toolkit, reach out if you have any questions. Along with that toolkit, what's next for this series is going to be 2 more webinars. So you see that information up on the screen. If you're interested in attending those, please register so that we can ensure we're getting the correct content to you. I know the registration process is very similar to the one for this session, so some of the same questions, but feel free to go ahead and fill that out. It's pretty quick, but we want to make sure we're getting the right resources to you all based on the different webinars that you're attending. And then with that, we do have a survey. I'm going to send that out. One thing about that survey is that you can enter, so say you're attending all 3 webinars, you can enter or you can complete, that survey 3 times. And with that, you all will be entered into a raffle to receive a $50 gift card. So you'll have 3 entries if you complete it for each of the webinars you attend. So I will send that link out to you all as well. I'm going to drop some information in the chat quickly. But with that, thank you all so much for being here. A big thank you again to Elizabeth and Alexandra for sharing your time and your insights. And we really appreciate you all for being here. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care, y'all.